Hello, BookTube. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Nathan Knapp. I am doing the BookTube Newbie Tag. So I have been posting some BookTube videos over the last few weeks, 6 weeks or so, something like that. And I've posted some other videos on my YouTube channel starting back in November. I always knew that I wanted to get around to doing the BookTube Newbie Tag. I just wasn't sure exactly what the channel was, so it took me a little bit to work through that first. So I'm going to try to get through these 10 questions as quickly as I can, as succinctly as I can. And for anyone who knows me personally, they can certainly attest that brevity is not always my strong suit, but I will try to be brief. So question number one, why did you start this channel? There's a lot of different reasons. One of them would be I have found that my reading life has been a little unfocused and directionless, which I don't like. I like reading with a purpose in mind. And so I've always kind of had a purpose to my reading. I mean, whether I was, in high school and then in university, I have several degrees in English, a BA in English literature, and then a Bachelor of Education in teaching English, and then a master's in English literature. So I've always had a big focus with much of what I'm reading. But, I found even teaching in the classroom, because I've been teaching for a while, there's a whole lot that I'm reading that I just don't have an opportunity to talk to people about. And that's really a big part of this channel for me, is to get into all of these books that I want to talk about, but they're not appropriate for the classroom for all kinds of reasons, whether it be that they're just too long, they're too sophisticated, or the content isn't appropriate. And I don't have a lot of people in my life who will listen to me go on and on and on when I start getting into fairly deep analysis of a text that they don't really care that much about. So I figure if I just record these things and throw them on YouTube, then I have no idea when you're Xing out of this. I don't know when that happens, so I can just happily go on and I won't know if nobody's all the way at the end of the video. And if there's some way of knowing that, don't tell me how to find it, because I'm much happier not knowing. So that's a big part of it, is just having some purpose to my reading. There's other things involved with this as well. I'm a writer. My debut novel came out in November of 2018, and I want to be taking my writing career more seriously, which means I want to be taking my reading more seriously, that I want to be focused on that. And then big picture questions about publishing in general. I do plan on posting some videos about my own writing career, my writing process, and the publishing industry, and all of that stuff. So I figure I can kind of put that all in one place on BookTube. Number two, what are some fun and unique things you can bring to BookTube? First of all, there will be no fun on this channel. I refuse. I do not participate in fun. If you're looking for fun, then there or there is the X button, depending on whether you're using a Mac or a PC or a phone. I don't know, the button on the back, on the side. You can close this, because if you're looking for fun, you found the wrong channel. Unique things, I don't think there's anything actually that unique that I'm bringing to this. I mean, I will try to sell myself a little bit better than that. Unique things that I bring to the channel. Well, I guess what my intent here is that I've spent a good deal of my life teaching English, being a high school English teacher. I've been a professor of English as well at the college level. And what I want to do is I want to take that critical lens to texts that a lot of people don't think should be taken that seriously. And so one of the big challenges that I'm going to take on fairly soon is I'm going to read through the entire Repairman Jack series by F. Paul Wilson. And I'm going to, take a pretty deep dive into the series. At least that's my attempt. I've posted some other videos. You can take a look at some of the ones that I've posted already. You can see that I'm really interested in taking quite seriously most things that I'm reading. So maybe that's unique, but I don't know. Maybe it isn't. So I probably shouldn't boast about that being unique. So I guess neither fun nor unique. I also have an interesting combination, which I've already mentioned, being a teacher, a writer. I did intern for a little bit at a publisher. I've got some editing experience. So between all of those things, maybe there will be a nice melange that comes together that makes it unique. The other thing that I do on this channel is on Mondays, I post a podcast with my brother. It's called Ignore the Bell, where we really talk about movies, and it's the same approach. We're taking pretty deep dives into film, into cinema, and I studied that as well in university, and I've always taken that quite seriously. I've got a screenplay that I've written, so I enjoy that too, and I'm interested in all of the different ways that stories can be told, but in particular, literature and film. So there's that. And BookTube videos I very likely will be posting on, well, certainly on Thursdays. And so my movie podcast on Mondays, BookTube videos always on Thursdays, and then there's probably going to be quite a few more mixed in throughout the week. Number 3, what are you most excited for about this new channel? I think feedback from other readers and the community. Obviously, I'm excited to read all of these books and really discuss them and get into them, and to participate to some degree in tags and talk about different trends that I see in publishing and in my own writing process, getting into all of that. I also plan on looking at some literary theory as well as I work through that, because by no means am I an expert in literary theory or literary criticism, but I really like talking about it. And to me, what I think is great about BookTube is the fact that you can get feedback. You don't just post it and then it just disappears into the ether of the internet, but people can respond. They can respond in the comments, they can respond by making other videos. And that's what I love in the classroom. But the classroom is, you can only do so much there, which is why I called my podcast Ignore the Bell. Basically, the bell just stops the class period and then it all ends, and I want it to keep going beyond that. So that's my hope, to get feedback from other readers and the community in general. Number 4, why do you love reading? All right, get comfortable, because this is going to take me a little bit to unpack. Simply put, I love reading because I think it is magic. It really is an incredible thing. Stephen King, before, I've heard him describe reading and writing, that interplay between them, as a form of telepathy. That basically he can write something on a page and then it shows up in your mind. And while that seems like kind of a silly answer, or almost like a riddle where you hear the answer and you're like, okay, sure, that's telepathy. But I think that there's actually a fair bit to this. I love reading because it's difficult and it's a skill. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And people who don't read very much, and I can say this as somebody who teaches a lot of students who don't like to read and they don't enjoy it. And the reason they don't enjoy it is that they're not very good at it. And that's not a criticism. It means that the magic isn't happening. There is no magic when they're reading through it. The amazing thing about reading, especially if you're reading fiction, but it's not just limited to fiction, but when you're reading fiction, what happens is these little symbols on the page somehow turn into images in your mind, where you can hear the voices, you can see the movement, the motion of what's going on. You can feel things that are all being encoded in these little symbols on a page. That is a form of intimacy that I find absolutely brilliant and fascinating and amazing. The fact that reading even works blows my mind. If you think about that, all the things that are going on in our mind when we are reading text on a page, and that we can then generate images in our mind, it's incredible. And what I mean by intimacy is that you've got what the writer does and then what you as the writer do, and you are both vital for this thing to work. You have to work together. That's why I'm saying that it is basically intellectual intimacy, that the writer is only half constructing the meaning, and the reader is then doing the rest of the work. That the writer puts it down on the page, but the writer has not actually created imagery. The writer has not actually created this lovely interplay of dialogue between two characters until somebody comes along and they decode what the writer encoded. And that's totally different than many other forms of storytelling. So if you look at film, film is all done for you. It's a complete process. The visuals are just boom, they are there on the screen. They are objectively there. Or if you look at it, then it's the same way with video games, where it's all there. It's all being done for you. And so that to me is an absolutely incredible thing about reading. The next one, what book or series got you into reading? So there's a couple that did. I would say it first started with the Hardy Boys. The Hardy Boys was my first foray into reading and being absolutely blown away by what I'm reading. And it's also my first foray into literary criticism. I kind of stumbled across this without actually knowing it. Let me just pause this for a second. Sorry about that. My laptop battery was dying. So, the Hardy Boys. The Hardy Boys got me into reading, where I absolutely loved what was happening to these characters. But then it was also my first experience with literary criticism. And what I mean by that is I had the goal of reading the entire Hardy Boys series. And then the goal kind of disappeared by like book 13 or 14 or 15, something like that, where for whatever reason I was really struck by the end of a chapter where it ended with an exclamation mark, and I couldn't figure it out. I was like, that didn't seem that exciting. Why was there an exclamation mark at the end of that sentence? And then I was like, wait a minute. I think that there was an exclamation mark at the end of that last chapter. So I went back and looked. I'm like, there was. And that wasn't that exciting either. And then I went back to all the previous chapters, and I couldn't believe it. But in every chapter at the end, they all ended with exclamation marks. And then I felt like I had been duped, like I had been tricked, and it was not necessarily a good feeling. It didn't feel genuine. It felt like, you've been tricking me into reading this next chapter again and again. And so, like I say, that was my first realization of like what literary criticism could actually be, noticing something in the text and then kind of having a bigger sense of what's going on. Beyond that, I really liked reading Goosebumps when I was a kid, and Goosebumps in part because my parents told me that, you know, they were forbidden books and I was not allowed to read them, and I had to get them approved ahead of time. Can I read this edition? And so it had a whole bunch of mystique to it, the Goosebumps series, where reading had this lovely little allure of, you know, it's a little forbidden and it's pretty dangerous, so you got to be really careful about what you read. And even though my mom, I'm sure, would be appalled by the fact that her attempts to stop me from reading it really encouraged me to read it, but that is the case. That's what happened. And then I also really enjoyed Bruce Coville as a kid. I still have gone back and I've reread some of his books, but he was writing a lot of science fiction. And, you know, a lot of books that deal with aliens. And I feel like that was my first, the first time I really saw a writer taking science fiction, to me, what seemed to be in a fairly serious way. They weren't silly books, even though they had some comedy to them, but he was playing it straight for the most part. And I really liked that. I liked buying into the idea that maybe there could be aliens who have infiltrated our society, and what would I do if I were in that situation? So those were ones that I really liked reading when I was younger. That really got me into reading. Number 6, what questions would you ask your favorite booktubers? This one's a quick, easy one. Will you read or review my debut novel, Orphans of Liberty? So I've already got one who's done this, Steve Donahue. He did a review of Orphans of Liberty a couple months back. But aside from that, I haven't really had a whole lot of, or any, maybe I think one other BookTube review. But aside from that, I haven't had any. So that would be my question. And I will absolutely send you a free copy if you like. Number 7. What challenges do you think starting a BookTube channel will be the hardest to overcome? For me, being a perfectionist, that is a real problem for me. I tried other ways of being involved in the bookish world, in the literary world, in the publishing world. I've tried a blog, and it wasn't for me because anything I put in writing, I agonize over. And if I feel like something doesn't come out exactly perfect, I don't want to put it out there at all. And that can be a real issue. I mean, I'll make other videos about this, but even trying to, write my debut, that was hard, to know when I was finished, to know when it was ready to go out there. Even for this video, I did not intend to get up partway through to have to plug in my laptop. And now I'm like, I don't know what to do with that, and I certainly don't know how to edit. So then I'm like, get rid of the video, but I'm trying to overcome this. So this is me trying to overcome my perfectionist streak. Number 8, when did you start reading? This ties into me being a perfectionist or struggling with perfectionism. And it was grade 3 and fairly late, as best I remember, in grade 3, in 3rd grade. I wasn't reading anything, and my teachers were starting to get concerned. My parents were getting concerned, and I kind of have some memory of how this worked. I was able to read, but I was unwilling to read aloud if I saw a single word in a paragraph or on the page that I didn't know exactly how to pronounce, where I wasn't sure exactly what the word was. So I just refused to read the entire thing, even though I probably could have read, 98, 99 words out of 100 on a page. I just refused until I felt like I could read with 100% accuracy, which is not good. But eventually, basically, they kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and I saw my classmates making mistakes when they were reading, and it was no big deal. So then I basically came out as a reader, where it's like, I can actually do this thing. And the first book I read was a full chapter book. It was like 100 something pages in length that I just skipped over everything in between. And so I kind of went from zero to novels. And so, like I say, I'm aware that I do that. That I do have that issue with perfectionism. And I know I'm not the only one. And I feel like being transparent about it is helpful for other people. Number 9, where do you read? Anywhere where it's quiet. This has become more of a problem as the more years I've taught for, the more I really value silence when I'm reading, because I spend my entire day trying to get students to focus, trying to get them to zone into what they are working on, and to, often, not always, but often to stop being distracted and then focus in on the task at hand. And so if I'm trying to model that in the classroom, the problem is I start reading and then I'm like, what are you doing? And so if I'm out in a public place where, there's a lot of motion and movement and stuff like that, my teacher brain kicks in. And, if I'm out in a public place and somebody's moving around, then I just want to like shout at them, like, what are you doing? Sit down, get back to work, which is not good. So basically, I don't really read unless I'm by myself in a quiet place. And I'm not really particular beyond that. Just as long as it's quiet, then I'm good. The last question, number 10. What kind of books do you like to read? I read a lot of different genres. I read fiction, I read nonfiction, I read poetry, I read, some middle grade, young adult, a lot of adult fiction. I read in a bunch of different genres, but really, to give like the simplest answer, I don't know. I guess more than anything else, I like to read books that are described as genre fiction, but don't really follow very many of the tropes of genre fiction. And so some of my favorite books and my favorite authors, they are very, very hard to pin down on exactly what they're doing, on exactly what genre they fit into, because I actually kind of have some serious issues with genre studies as a whole. I think that it's a limiting way of looking at literature and saying, here are these rules that you absolutely must follow, and if you don't follow them, you're a bad writer, instead of saying, oh, that was actually very clever and imaginative, and isn't that wonderful the way you blended genres together, or you're doing stuff that really doesn't fit within that genre, but it worked. So that would be, generally speaking, what I like. Genre fiction that doesn't really follow the rules of genre fiction. And so, more specifically, that'd be horror, science fiction, fantasy, crime thrillers. I do enjoy thrillers a fair bit as far as fiction. And then, as far as nonfiction, I don't read a lot of nonfiction full length books, but I do read a lot of essays, and also, like I say, literary theory, which I'm interested in, and then poetry as well to some degree, and yeah, just kind of a little bit of everything. And you'll probably see that on my channel. Kind of a closing thought, just to give you a sense of the schedule. Like I say, I do post Ignore the Bell, which is really about movies, but it's taking a similar approach to that. That's on Mondays. BookTube videos are always going to be at least on Thursdays, and I'm probably going to start posting some on Fridays as I get into my Repairman Jack series, which I will post a whole announcement video that goes into the details of that. That'll get posted about a week or so from now. And in general, like I say, there's going to be a bunch of different videos that kind of get thrown in there throughout the week as I'm inspired to do other ones, like different tags and things like that. But generally speaking, Thursdays is my BookTube day, where you're mostly going to be getting longer discussions of books that I've already read. Okay, thank you so much for watching. All right, bye.